Zooming with people all across the country now. I had this kind of brainstorm that said, we've never really had a chance to hear from Saul about some of the history of the temple and some of the things that he encountered in the early days that he was with Valley. And so we're going to get some of that on the record tonight so that we have it. And so that in case people want to have their memories jogged a little bit, that's fine. So just by a show of hands, everybody should stay muted now for the rest of the evening until you're called on. But just by a show of hands, how many of you were a temple member at Valley when Rabbi Greenberg was still the rabbi? Raise your hands. Okay, so that's the majority, but not everybody. So if you're newer to the congregation than that, raise your hand.
Robert. I am.
All right, good. So we see our new rabbi, Rabbi Zutz here, and Elizabeth and Kara and the Schneiders. And I didn't see, maybe Lynn Wertheimer too. I don't remember. By the way, John Amber, it's great to see you. Okay, and Jean too. We can't hear you, but that's okay. Let's keep going. The other question I have is, how many of you did Rabbi Greenberg officiate at one of your weddings or your only wedding? Raise your hand. If Rabbi Greenberg officiated at your wedding.
Or for one of
He officiated at your first wedding, Sue?
Yes, right. That's what happened. That was a bad one. No.
I didn't know that.
My wedding to him.
No, I didn't.
Well, he could have officiated your.
No. My hand to be with the
it
group.
could be done with mirrors, I guess, but okay. Excellent. So when I first got to Valley, which was in 2001, Saul Greenberg was known throughout the country as the rabbi who had a very liberal intermarriage policy and built a congregation on learning how to say yes when a lot of other people said no to weddings. And we're going to get into that in a few minutes, but it is something that for years and years was a negative if you asked our colleagues, but it was a huge positive, not just for the temple, but for Judaism. And we'll talk about that. But first, Saul, what year were you ordained?
I was ordained in 1966 in Cincinnati. I had started my rabbinic career in Los Angeles. And in those days, you couldn't finish in Los Angeles. You had to finish in either New York or Cincinnati. But if you went to the California school, you had to finish in Cincinnati.
Wow. And so you were raised where?
I was born in Chicago and reared when I was from about the age of 1 year and older. I was living with my family in Joliet, Illinois, which is, my wife reminds you and me and everybody else, that's where the prisons are, in Joliet, Illinois.
I see. And what was the family business?
My father's business, he was in the produce business.
I didn't hear you. He was?
My father was in the wholesale produce business.
Wholesale produce. And so where did you go to undergrad? At HUC?
Well, I started out, I went to Chapman College in Orange. And I also did some work at UCLA. And then after a couple of years, I was also simultaneously taking classes at HUC in Los Angeles.
Right. So in those days, you could get a bachelor's degree from HUC and then go on to get.
I got what's called a BHL degree, but I graduated from Chapman College in Orange, California.
And what was your degree in?
My degree was in psychology.
So is it true that you ultimately got another degree in psychology later?
Well, I have a master's also, but it wasn't specifically in psychology.
Okay.
I mean, that's what my major really was, but they didn't give it in that specific area.
I understand. And so in 1966, you were ordained, and I just hasten to add, I was 3 when you were ordained. And what made it so that you stayed in Cincinnati?
Well, I stayed in Cincinnati because of the fact that I was happy living in Cincinnati. But most importantly is because I was concerned about my family, and I thought Cincinnati was a wonderful city to rear a family. And we were here and we were happy, and there was no reason to leave.
And in
I was happy with the congregation. I was very happy here.
So in 1966, you become the rabbi, one of the rabbis at Wise Temple. Is that right?
Yes. What had happened to me was that my family, part of my family, knew a lot of people in Cincinnati and had made arrangements that when we moved to Cincinnati, I was previously married, and my first wife and I knew a lot of family acquaintances here in Cincinnati, and they were very welcoming. And as you mentioned, my first experience was working at Wise Temple, and as a student at HUC, and I was working in the Hebrew department, and I was teaching in the high school and with the youth group. And when I was ordained, I just stayed on as the assistant rabbi for 2 years.
And how did you decide to come to Valley? What was going on at Valley that drew you here?
Well, there were two things. One was that I was not happy being in a very large congregation. It was too impersonal for me. And I wanted to have the experience, number one, of being in a congregation where I could have a more personal relationship with more of the congregants. And that was very important. Second of all, I wanted the opportunity, which later maybe we'll talk about when I did the interviewing at Valley, to do some experimental work. And the people from Valley Temple that I talked to, Julian Magnus in particular, and also Tom Benjamin at that time, they were very open to having some experimental activity in the congregation, such as experimental services, creative services, and also I was open to interfaith marriage and so on. And that was not afforded me at other places.
And was there any difficulty when you took the job at Valley with Wise?
No, I think Wise was they seemed to be okay. I mean, there was I never heard anything negative. I mean, maybe there was some, but nobody ever said anything negative to me, not the rabbis nor congregants. I didn't think they looked, that Valley at that time was extremely small. I don't know how many families we actually had, because there was a difference of opinion among people who were members of Valley as to how many actual members there were. I heard figures anywhere from 13 to 22 to 40 or 50 families. Nobody seemed to really know. I think Julian Magnus would probably know better than I, because that number was a moving target all the time. And so I don't think Wise, which was very large at the time, looked at Valley as being any kind of a competition, or that I would steal away their members or anything of that sort.
Did any come over?
What?
Did any come over?
Yes, there were a number of families that came over. Not a lot, but there were a number that came over.
And was anybody else in town officiating at intermarriages at the time?
No, they were not.
And was it a requirement that you do intermarriages when you came over?
No. What happened, I don't know if you want to go into this now, but when I was an assistant rabbi at Wise Temple in the United States at that time, among the Reform rabbinate at least, if the senior rabbi in a congregation did not do an intermarriage, the assistant rabbi could not do, no matter what his position was, he was not allowed to do an interfaith marriage. If the senior rabbi did do an intermarriage, there weren't very many, believe me, in the country at that time, then the assistant had the opportunity to either do or not do the interfaith marriage as his conscience dictated. Wise Temple at that time, the rabbis would not do an interfaith marriage. And thank you. They would not do an interfaith marriage. And I had an experience, which I will tell you about, which now I can talk about freely because the other people are no longer with us, so it's not going to hurt anybody. But I was the assistant rabbi, and the policy of the congregation at Wise was nobody would do an interfaith marriage. And I got a call at that time from the senior rabbi that he was out of town and he wasn't able to get back into Cincinnati because of some kind of transportation difficulty. And would I be willing to pinch hit for him because he had a wedding in his study that day and he wasn't going to be able to get back? Would I mind doing the wedding, a simple wedding in his study? There would only be the bride and the groom and 2 witnesses and me. And I said, of course. And I did. And as the wedding was over, the ceremony was over, and we were signing the papers, the groom says to me, I want to thank you very much for doing this wedding, since there were no other rabbis that would do an interfaith marriage in Cincinnati. And I was kind of shocked because I said, what do you mean it's an interfaith marriage? And he said, well, my new bride is not Jewish and is not converted. And it was so nice that the senior rabbi had agreed to do this interfaith marriage in his study. So that was my first interfaith marriage without ever knowing that I was doing an interfaith marriage. And when I realized that God did not strike me dead for doing it, then I continued to do it.
And do you think it was Rabbi his intention to trick you?
I have no idea. I mentioned it to him and he never really responded one way or another. And, but he said what he did in his study was his business and he didn't have to answer to anybody else. But I thought it was quite unprofessional of him not to have told me in advance of what he was doing. To be honest with you, I would have done the interfaith ceremony anyhow, because that was my feeling that I would have done them. But I did it without knowing the first one.
Huh, wow. Okay, so let's get a little more Valley history in here. So you come to Valley in 1969, is that right?
68.
In 1968, wow. And so when you come in 1968, it's not clear how many people are members, which is fine. Where was the congregation meeting at the time?
The congregation had been meeting in people's homes for Friday nights. I think they were meeting, if my memory serves me correctly, about once a month each time in somebody else's home. Occasionally they'd meet every other week. For the High Holy Days, they met at the Hebrew Union College, at the chapel at the Hebrew Union College. And when they came to me and they discussed what they were going to do in the future, and we had a number of discussions before I came here and accepted the position, one of the things I felt very strongly about, and they agreed, was that in order for the temple to grow, that it was imperative that they had some kind of a physical location, that they needed a place that people could recognize and identify with. And fortunately, there were a number of people, I think 10 or 12 people in the congregation, families, who were willing to each put up a certain amount of money, and they bought a house at 122 Springfield Pike. I don't know if you've seen that home. It's a smaller home. And they bought that house, and they redecorated it to the extent and reconfigured it so that we had a chapel area on the main floor. And we had upstairs a couple of classrooms and an office, which were the bedrooms, and had been turned into, as I said, an office for the secretary and one for me. And I think there were either one or two classrooms, and the downstairs we could divide up. So we could actually have meetings there and adult education and a Friday night service there. High Holy Days, we still continue to have at the Hebrew Union College Chapel. And the religious school met at the Jewish Center.
And that was in Roselawn.
In Roselawn, we met at the old Jewish Center in Roselawn, yes.
Right. And so what year did the building across the street get built? The one that we're in now?
1975, if my memory serves me correctly. And that's
Okay.
not a given. That my memory.
I understand. How many years did it take to get enough money together to do that? Do you remember?
Well, I don't think it took very long, not more than a couple of years. I mean, by the time we decided to do it and the congregation decided, the congregation had grown. I think by that point we were over 100 families, and a number of people in the congregation. Bob Levinson, I remember in particular, was in charge, I think, of fundraising. David Spritz worked on fundraising. And there were a number of other people, the executive board. Julian, of course, was involved, Tom Benjamin. And they did an unbelievable job with the fundraising. And I don't think it took more than a couple of years for the building to get, from the time they started until we actually started to build the building and get it completed.
And what was at the site where the temple is now before it was the temple?
Well, the original, I think, acreage was 3 acres of land, and on there was a home. It was an older brick home, and they arranged to have the Wyoming Fire Department use the building and burn it down as a practice event, which meant then they would tear it down, whatever was left, and they would haul it away. So that saved the temple some money. But before they did that, they had a sale where people could come in and strip the inside of the house and buy whatever they wanted. It was an old house. They had a lot of nice wooden things and banisters and things. And people came in and they did that, and people bought the inside of the house that they could, whatever they could use, lights, as I said, banisters, stairs, whatever they could rip out of the house, they took. It was surprising to me, but they did it. And then the fire department burned the building down as a practice event, and then they carted away the thing, and then we built the temple.
Wow. Well, and what about the Torah? Did you acquire a Torah for the temple, or was it already there by the time you got there?
Well, the temple had, at some point, not right away, but we had one Torah that came from the Berman family, Dolph Berman and Nancy Berman's family, that was there.
And everybody should know that's the middle Torah that's in the ark now.
Yes.
The smallest
And
one.
then we had another, eventually we had another Torah that I think we purchased. I don't remember this, I'm not clear on this. And then there was one Torah that Sue and I arranged for, that was a Holocaust, it was
Holocaust Memorial Torah.
Holocaust Memorial Torah that we got, and we purchased through, or paid whatever the expenses were involved to get it from England. The synagogue in London was handling the transaction and
It's a
whatever
check.
was required.
It's a check scroll from, and the Westminster Synagogue was keeping track of it. And they've actually been to the temple to make sure it's still in good condition.
Really?
So,
That's
yeah.
interesting. They never came when I was there. But, okay. I think it was from Brno, Czechoslovakia, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Say the city again in Czechoslovakia.
Brno, B-R-N-O, Czechoslovakia.
Great. That's not a word, a place that we've heard yet. So thank you for that. And so the first Torah was the Berman Torah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know which was first. If it was if it was the original, there was an original Torah that we purchased, and I don't know the order in which we obtained the Torahs. I know when we got the Birna Czechoslovakia Torah, we arranged to have that for the dedication of the temple when we moved in 1975.
Oh, how cool. Excellent.
That was the reason for getting it at that particular time, was for the dedication of the temple.
Excellent. So there were 2 full-time rabbis that preceded you. Is that correct?
No, there were no full-time rabbis, to my knowledge, that were actual full-time rabbis. The only one that I knew personally of was a rabbi by the name of David Zelenko. And David was there, but I don't believe he was actually full-time. He lived in the community. He lived just a few doors down from where Friendly's ice cream was. I don't think they're there anymore, are they? On Wyoming Avenue?
No.
No. I don't know what's there.
It's down by the high school.
It's
Yeah.
what?
Friendly's was down by the high school.
Yeah. But there were tennis courts back there. And then there was a Friendly's or some kind of an ice cream store in the front. And his house was on Wyoming Avenue, just a few doors. And he lived there. And I don't know what else he did, but I don't think he was full-time.
Okay. And then does the name Herbert Stern ring a bell to you?
Of course, I know the name, but I don't remember anything with him being with the temple, just other than the fact that he had some association with it.
And what about
my
Dr.
time.
What about Dr. Kronbach, Abraham Kronbach?
Well, Abraham Kronbach was like a unbelievable person in all kinds of ways, and he was a pacifist, and he was a special kind of a person. People may not agree with all the things he did, but he was the one who went around, even though he knew what was happening in Nazi Germany, went around and he collected money for the widows of German soldiers who had died during the Second World War. I mean, he was a real unusual kind of a peacenik, in a good way. I don't mean that in a critical way.
And what was his connection to Valley?
I think he liked the fact that Valley was Valley, that it was starting, that it was small, that it was intimate. And I'm not sure about this, but at that time, when I first came to Valley Temple, there was an organization which was called the American Council for Judaism. I don't know if you remember that or if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
But they were basically an anti-Zionist group. They did not believe in the establishment of the state of Israel. They did not believe in using Hebrew in the service. They did not believe in a lot of the more traditional observances and so on. And Valley did have a few people who were members of that organization. And that was a problem. When I came to Valley, there were a couple of people who were not happy because I had always been a Zionist, and I also believed in using Hebrew in the service, and I believed in having bar and bat mitzvah services and so on. And they were not happy with that. I think one or two of them left the temple. A couple of them converted and stayed, and they stayed there with us. And they somehow stayed with us and bit their tongues and continued to exist in the congregation. And Abraham Kronbach, I think, I'm not positive in this, but I think he was not much of a Zionist. And I think saw Valley as being part of that group.
Well, my understanding is, and Helen Waits can tell us more about this because her mother was Helen Dreyfus, who was not Helen Dreyfus, but Louise Dreyfus, who was one of the founding directors of education when it was the School for Judaism before it became Valley Temple. And Dr. Kronbach was signing the certificates for the kids that were graduating from the School for Judaism. So I know that he was involved back then. And apparently Dr. Marcus,
That was before me.
That's correct. That's correct. And so I just didn't know if by the time you got there, if Dr. Kronbach was still active.
No, not at all.
And I know that he and Dr. Jacob Brader Marcus were friendly. and that Dr. Marcus also was in some of the archive literature as having been supportive of the temple as well. Was he
Yeah.
connected to the temple by the time you got there?
Dr. Marcus?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was not an official member as such, but he was very, very involved in the sense that he was very kind to me and did everything he could to help me and the congregation in whatever way he could. But he didn't do it publicly. He would do it privately.
Okay, so you told us that you were tricked into doing intermarriages in the senior rabbi study of the rival congregation. So the question is, what kind of, how did the reputation develop that you were the rabbi to go to for intermarriages? How did that happen?
Well, it wasn't, it was an interesting thing. I had another experience which really had a tremendous effect on me. It doesn't sound like much maybe now today, but I had a young couple came to see me. Both of them were highly educated. Both were successful. They were from Cincinnati, but they were both living in New York. And they were, I would say today, you would look at them and say they were a fairly sophisticated couple in many ways. And when they came to see me to get married, to talk about the marriage and so on, I asked them at the end of our conversation, talking about the wedding and the plans and the date, all the practical kinds of things that you would have to discuss with the young couple before a ceremony, if they had any other questions. And this young gentleman says to me that he was grateful for all my help and so on, but that his fiancée, I don't know, he said, if you know, that we know she's pregnant and we have a question. And first of all, I was a little surprised about the fact that she was pregnant, that wouldn't have affected whether or not I would have officiated at their marriage. But I said, what is your question? And he said, I want to know if we have intercourse now. Can she get pregnant now? And then in 9 months from now, first of all, she's 3 months pregnant. So in 6 months, have the first child, and then in another 9 months, have the second child. And when I heard the question, I couldn't believe that I was listening to this and that they knew so little about the physiology of the human being and of his bride to be, especially since she was already pregnant. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that if I'm going to do premarital counseling, I'm going to be involved in people's lives, I better be dealing with some things which are a little bit more significant and basic than just what time is the ceremony going to be and which hotel are you going to get married. And because of that, I started to get involved more and more in counseling with couples and doing a lot more premarital counseling. And part of doing that, I came very quickly to the realization that although religion is certainly, and I'm very much committed to this, that religion is certainly an important aspect of the relationship between two people, that there are lots of issues that are important to a couple before they get married. You know, their educational backgrounds, their knowledge, their cultural things, their family background, what they know about life and so on, and what they share, what they don't share, and so on. So there's so many areas of life that are important that need to be dealt with, that as a rabbi, if I really wanted to be of help to these people, I better get involved with some of these kinds of issues, and then develop from that a program of extensive premarital counseling. And that got me into that. And as part of that, I also I realized that it wasn't religion which was the ultimate determinant of a successful or a failure in marriage, but it was all of these factors that had to be considered. And religion was only one aspect of it. And so that led me more and more into not only the counseling, but also being more open to doing interfaith marriage.
Nice. And what was the greatest distance that a couple came for you to do their intermarriage? In other words, people were coming, I was told people were coming from all over the country because they were having such a hard time finding a rabbi.
No, I don't really think so. I mean, people, no, I don't remember that. I don't remember that at all. The only time I had a really long distance, and they were from Cincinnati. I had somebody who he actually was in the military, and he couldn't get back. Something happened in the military, and we had to arrange. His bride was with me, and he was someplace else, and we did the marriage over the phone. But other than that, I don't remember any long distance people coming in from any long distance. They were all either from Cincinnati or we had family in Cincinnati.
Oh, okay, good. And was there any price to pay in the community for the fact that you were doing intermarriages and so few were?
Yeah, I think there were people who were very other rabbis. The problem was for the other rabbis is that if you didn't do an interfaith marriage, it was a problem for you and your own congregation, because congregants, especially in Reform temples, they wanted their rabbi, if you had a child that was going to marry a non-Jew and the family was okay with it, they wanted their rabbi, first of all, they knew him, and second of all, they knew the congregation and their friends were there and so on. And so they wanted it to be in their own backyard. And if their rabbi wouldn't do it, it put the rabbi on the spot, their own rabbi on the spot. And so that was a problem for the other rabbi. In terms of the conservative rabbis and the Orthodox rabbis, they were very much opposed to it. And the Orthodox rabbis were, at that particular time, not because of me, but in general, the Orthodox really made a break. Really made a break and broke away from the Reform movement completely and wouldn't even meet. The Board of Rabbis would not include, they wouldn't come to the Board of Rabbis meetings anymore, and they wouldn't even do it. And that all remained the case, where people would actually speak out against it until one of the Orthodox rabbis' children was marrying a non-Jew. And that child came to me to get married. And I then, I dealt with the child as an adult. And with that child's permission, I talked to the father, and he was opposed to the intermarriage. But he told me he was grateful that I was doing the ceremony, that they would at least have a Jewish, not even in his mind, not a kosher ceremony, but at least a Jewish ceremony. And after that, I don't know if he said something or whatever it was, I never got a negative comment again.
Wow, that's great. Do you have any idea how many weddings you officiated at in your career?
No.
Any idea what the average number?
No, I would say I probably did somewhere between 25 and 35 weddings a year.
25 and 35
Maybe,
weddings?
yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And you were at Valley from 1968 to 2000.
Somewhere at the end of 68 until
2000.
I left.
Right. You went on disability in 2000 and retired in 2001. That's what I was told. And
Okay.
it's a story I'm sticking with. So y'all can do the math about how many Jews he saved to Judaism because of it. And it's, you know, having been the rabbi that came after you retired, a lot of people wanted to talk smack about your policy. And I kept saying, there are a lot of Jews at Valley Temple that wouldn't have been Jews had Rabbi Greenberg not officiated at their wedding. And everybody needs to take a breath and stop talking like that, because you pretty much saved a lot of demographic Jews to be real Jews rather than just Jews in name only. So from where I sit, you did the world a great service.
Well,
And
thank you.
And I think that I, it just makes me crazy. The only other thing that I want to say before we break up into, not break up, but have people start asking questions as well, is that I want to remind you that you and I met when I was 15 in 1978 at the Goldman Union Camp, which was not called that then. And you were the first rabbi to ask me to think about God. I had come from Temple Flash Dance in Detroit, otherwise known as Temple Israel. And in that temple, they spent a lot of time doing a lot of things, but not really having rabbis talk to kids the way you talk to kids, sitting around a tree or next to a tree at camp. And it's something that I'll always be grateful to you for, because it started me on a journey that made it so that I could be the rabbi in your temple. So thank you for that. And with that, we are going to figure out now how to open this up to some questions. So that's not what I want to do. Hold on. First, I want to do this. Oh, for God's sake. Here we go. I'm doing that. Now I'm going to go to over here. If you all have a question, don't unmute yourself yet. There we go. If you'll raise a physical hand or click the hand raise thing, that's fine. Jim Levinson, you're up first.
I know Jim Levinson.
Yes, you do. Jim, anybody who I call on, say your name and say how long you've been a member of the temple, and then ask your question quickly so we can get a lot of questions in. Jim, go ahead. You have to unmute though, Jim.
Yes. Jim Levinson, son of Bob Levinson, who is, as Rabbi Greenberg said, very involved in getting the building built. I'm 62 years old. I've been a member of my whole 62 years. And Rabbi Greenberg married my wife and I, Pam. And again, part of your comment before was very specific, because Pam and I have raised 3 Jewish boys, and we now have a couple of grand boys. And just to make Saul feel a little older, we're this summer will be 40 years since he married us. So.
Whoa, mazel tov.
So
and your question?
I'd heard it. I know you had some disabilities and had some back troubles, and somebody had told me that you were doing better. Is that true? Are you able to? I know at one point you were having a lot of back troubles and stuff. I'm assuming that you were able to get that taken care of it somewhere along the way, or at least feel better.
Well, thank you for asking. First of all, it's wonderful seeing you, and thank you for your nice comments. Yeah, we came here when we retired to Florida. In southern Florida, we were able to make contact with a doctor in Miami who was the head of the Department of Neurosurgery at University of Miami Hospital it's I think Jackson Memorial, it's called, hospital in Miami, Florida. And he performed 2 surgeries on me. He and another doctor took both about 6, 7 years ago.
Oh my God, much longer.
More, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it was. And they were pretty extensive, but the good part about it, even though it took a long time to heal from those, is that I'm doing much, much better. Yeah.
2000.
Excellent.
2002, my wife says, but I don't.
Who else has a question? Okay, Greer. This is Greer Schneider, and she is a newer member to our congregation. Go ahead, Greer.
Yes, it's very nice to meet you over Zoom. My question is, listening to the history, you came in 1968, but by 1970, where you said number of congregants, you weren't sure, maybe it was 12, maybe it was 20, but by 1975, the congregation grew enough in order to be able to build a temple. What do you think were the qualities or attributed to that? Seems like it was probably an exponential growth. So what do you think attracted the most people, and could you comment on that? Because that seems pretty remarkable.
Well, first of all, I'm looking at all your musical instruments in the background. What do you guys do?
I'm a lawyer, and my husband wants to be a one-hit wonder.
Congratulations on that.
More guitars does not make you a better guitar player, I've learned.
Okay, great. Well, I think it was the fact that we did have that that the fact that we were welcoming as a congregation, I think that was number one. We really felt that we welcomed everybody to the congregation, even people who were interfaith married, and that the non-Jewish member didn't necessarily convert. We always were very respectful of them and those people and their religion, and made them feel at home. We never put the children ill at ease. If a child would say, during religious education in the religious school around Christmas time, sometimes I remember in some congregations, if a child would say, well, my mother is Catholic and we have a Christmas tree, the child would be made to feel somewhat less than the other children in the class because they were different. We never did that. We were very conscious about making everybody in the congregation, no matter what their status, to feel comfortable and at home. That was number one. Number two, I think that we were more experimental in a lot of ways. We had a lot of creative services, which I think were important to younger couples. They wanted to see that. We were also open to differences of opinion in terms of theology and in terms of belief. Some were more traditional, some were more reformed. We welcomed all those kinds of people into the congregation. And I think people responded to that positively. And most importantly, maybe, is that we made a decision that this was going to be a warm kind of a congregation and a family congregation, and that I was going to know everybody, if I could possibly do it, and they wanted me to know every single member of the congregation, know them by name, know their children, and know them as families and as friends, not only congregants. And that's what we try to create, is having that warm and inviting atmosphere in the congregation. And I think that appealed to a lot of people.
Yeah, try following that.
Yeah.
Other questions? Go ahead, Les. You have to unmute.
Rabbi Saul, very nice to see you once again.
Hi,
You're looking
Les.
real well. Question. You married my daughter, Tracy Schusterman, back in 1997. I called it interreligious marriage, because her husband's grandfather was a very Orthodox rabbi, and he wanted to be involved in the ceremony as well. So you got together with him at the Valley Temple and you performed the service together. And I was just wondering, have you ever done something like that again? Or before that?
Well, I've done it with conservative rabbis, but I don't think another Orthodox. That was unusual. That was unusual.
You remember that? You still remember that? Okay, great.
Yes, thank you. Good
Great.
seeing you, Les.
It's good seeing you again. We live.
And I see Sam Mantell came on. I just want to wave at him.
Okay, so this is Sam Mantell, Sam Mantell's son,
Really?
that they call SJ, but not.
Oh,
He would prefer to be called Sam. But the Sam Mantell of which you speak would have been in his 90s now.
well, I'm getting there.
All right, so Sam SJ, go ahead, you're up.
Oh, thank you. Rabbi Greenberg, this is such a treat. I was wondering if you had any memories of my dad or my mom and dad that you can actually say on this meeting. That you know, anything that you remember, or any good memories of stuff he might have done or did.
I do a story, but I'm not going to tell you on here. I'll have to tell you personally sometime, quietly and off the record. But I certainly remember your parents very well, and I hope you'll give your dad my regards.
Yep. Thank you. Just so you know, he passed in 2014.
No, I thought he said he was like in his 90s. Oh,
He would
I
have been.
misunderstood.
My bad.
All right, well, then don't give him my regards.
I apologize that it was my mistake. Okay, who
That
else?
was
has-
a joke, Sam. I mean,
Well, he's still dead, so I feel bad about it. The Bermans have gotten very tech savvy and have raised their hand electronically.
Who did?
Dolph and Nancy.
Dolph and Nancy. So put to you and go ahead and ask your question.
Well, the only thing I wanted to do was to add a little part of the history. The question was, why did the temple grow? I was one of the originals, so I saw it grow. I think a couple things. One, we were in Wyoming, and I think the community of Wyoming really wanted to have the diversity that the temple brought. And the fact that we then had children who were matriculating through the Wyoming school system, the other religious organizations kind of adopted the temple, and it grew because I think really the community of Wyoming helped us get our feet on the ground, and it was really a community, and Saul was very instrumental in the school system and brought a lot of knowledge of Judaism to a community that did not have a lot of knowledge about Judaism. So I think that was one of the biggest things. There was a question of how far somebody would come. I do know that there was a long travel from Western Hills that somebody came. And the participants, I think, will be happy to know that it was Pete Rose's brother that Saul married. And I think that's may be one of our more famous intermarriages that the temple that we enjoyed. But that gave you a little history. I think also that Rabbi Marcus and
Rabbi Kronbach,
the other rabbi, they were both over at HUC at the time.
That's
were
correct.
They not so?
They were.
And the temple participated for the High Holy Days at HUC. So there was a connection that HUC helped us in the growth of the Valley Temple.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think Dolph is absolutely, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, I think Dolph is absolutely right. It's a good contribution that the fact that Wyoming really was ready to have a congregation and the people were willing, the non-Jewish community, but also the Jewish community that was in Wyoming really had a place to call home and could identify with. It was extremely important. We were in the right place at the right time and doing the right thing.
great. Who else has a question? So as we're looking for others who may have a question, my understanding is that you were instrumental in the high school trip to Israel scholarships from the foundation. What do you remember about that?
From the Joint Reform High School?
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, I was one of the founders of that, and that program, that was an extremely important program. You're talking about that we got each, first of all, that we formed the Joint Reform High School was a major accomplishment. But again, that came out of necessity. Most of the Reform congregations, once a child had a bar or bat mitzvah, we lost them. We never saw that child again. And even though we had confirmation services, we saw the number of children who would stay on from bar mitzvah to confirmation every year. It seemed to be dwindling over a number of years. And in order to combat that, we decided to get together all of the reform congregations and start this Joint Reform High School. And right from the beginning, it was pretty successful. And then we wanted to keep the kids past confirmation and go all the way through graduation. And the solution that we came up with was to give these kids scholarships. And that was the easiest thing we ever did. It was not difficult to get people to donate and to get all these kids scholarships to go to Israel. Is that still going?
yes. The Jewish Foundation in Cincinnati is giving, I think it's $6,500 per kid to go to Israel in high school.
Yeah, yeah. That was a wonderful, wonderful program, and I was glad to be a part of it.
Great. Okay, Sam. Lobar.
This is just actually in connection to the high school. I think, Dolph, weren't you part of the first board of the high school? Was sort of a question for Dolph, not for.
Yes. At that time, the high school was formed by the four presidents, Valley, Wise, Rockdale, and Temple Sholem. And we benefited, I think, more because we only had 4 or 5 students when the other congregations had many more. And it would have required us to have a teacher. We would have to have a principal to run a high school. And the 4 presidents got together and we formed this joint, and we would each semester we would meet at a different sanctuary. One semester we would meet at Rockdale, one semester we would meet at Wise. However, at the Valley, we weren't large enough to hold all the students. So we kind of gave up our home and home series and we went along. But the most interesting story about the high school is that it was very successful. This joint high school met on Sundays and it was truly successful, and the kids merged. You have to remember, our kids who lived in Wyoming did not have that much social interaction with the other children who were over in Roselawn or Amberley or whatever. So it was a chance for our students to meet and socially get together on a Sunday night. Now, the interesting story was that there were, and Saul will talk to you about this, was coming upon a curriculum. All the rabbis had an input into the curriculum. And one rabbi might want to be teaching such and such, and another rabbi from a different temple wanted a different curriculum. And it got to be kind of, it got kind of testy with the curriculum. But the story was that this was a very successful venture. And one day I got a call from Rabbi Goldfeder at Adath, Israel. And he asked me would I have lunch with him. And I said, certainly. And we had lunch. And he said to me, he has a problem at Adath, Israel. His high school students wanted to come to our joint high school. They had heard about the social, we were having really great success. And he asked me, would I consider having the Adath Israel children come to our high school? And I said, I would have to take it up with our rabbis. And the end of the story, Saul might be able to tell us what happened. But the end of the story is that we had one rabbi at one of our temples who did not want to have any children from Adath Israel come to the high school. And the reason was that he was afraid that that rabbi would then have some input into the curriculum, and he wanted it to keep it strictly reform. Saul, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, only, first of all, Dolph, you're absolutely correct. But yes, there were a couple of the other rabbis who did not want the conservative kids to come to our joint reform high school for that very reason. They were afraid that they were going to bring in conservative Jewish ideas and taint the reform kids. I did not agree with that position. I thought it would have been an asset to have the conservative kids in our school. But the constitution that we had, or the bylaws that we had, that if any one of the 4 congregations or the rabbis vetoed it, it was vetoed. And since there were 2 who didn't want it, it was vetoed. And we never were able to bring in, and I think the conservative started their own. Did they?
They did, and there's now discussions going on about merging the 2. Any other questions? Any other questions? Well, this is about right. Okay, so,
Question,
who?
Julian, your
Julian?
father,
Julian.
Go ahead, Julian.
hello, Saul. It's good to see you looking so good again.
Nice to see you, Julian and Carol.
I'm going to jog your memory a little bit and then I'll make a comment. There was one place on our development that I think you left something out. And those are the days when we met at the Friendship Methodist Church
Yes.
in Wyoming. And the reason I remember it so well is we used my cabinet that I hold my table leaves as a container for the Torah, and we put a big curtain over the cross. And I'm sure you remember that when you think about it.
And that was over the cross of the church, not of your table leaf container.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
I saw Saul was rabbi in an entirely different capacity than Saul did, because I was on the board and president one time, and I saw things that I can phrase in my mind differently. When we hired Saul, or I should say when we gave him the opportunity to be our rabbi, our temple was in chaos. At that time, the old original founders of the religious school wanted a temple that reformed the reform. And the biggest discussion in the board meetings was how much Hebrew should we allow. That worked for the old time founders, but as new members came in, they demanded more of a legitimacy to go with the Jewish religion. And the board meetings were literally tumultuous. I can still remember people throwing things at each other while they argued. Saul filled a void. The void was to help the temple find a direction, which it didn't really have when he got there. He didn't push, but in a very gentle way, through using his personality and his beliefs, he led the temple in a direction that it cohesed. It came together and as a unit. And that was really what I saw responsible for 33 years of Saul leading the temple. He made it, gave it a purpose and a direction, and I think we still have that direction today. I guess that's about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Julian.
All right, we have time for one last question. Anybody?
I add one thing to what Julian said, and that is that when we first came there the first number of years, we would have Passover services at the Episcopal Church for a couple of years and at the Methodist Church for a couple of years. And the ladies group, whatever it was, at each of those two churches, they prepared the meal. And we had our service there. We did a complete Seder service, and we invited them, and many of them came and participated in the service as well. But we had a wonderful relationship with the other congregations in Wyoming. They were very accepting, and we had a wonderful, wonderful time with those congregations doing joint services. Even with the Catholic, not even, the Catholic Church as well, we had a number of programs. So it was the community itself was extremely welcoming and pleasant to be in for us.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Saul. And David Feltzing, was your hand up? No, it wasn't. Okay, good. So look, thank you all for being a part of our evening tonight, and especially thanks to Saul and Sue. Saul, we were going to ask you who your favorite congregant was, but we're out of time.
Can I say something?
Please.
I want to say, first of all, on behalf of Sue and myself, I want to thank you for having us and giving us this opportunity. I can't tell you how wonderful this is for us to see so many of you that we know and to meet some new folks. You were wonderful to have us, and you made us feel terrific. I mean, I'm really energized by seeing
You want your
this.
job back?
No, I do not. And second of all, I know it's been a tough year for everybody, and I want to wish everybody good health and happiness, and I hope we all stay healthy. We all did our shots, and everybody has a wonderful new year, this wonderful new year. And thirdly, I want to say thank you to Rabbi Kopnick. Sandford is probably one of the nicest, sweetest, humblest, caring, and thoughtful persons I know. He has been just unbelievable to me. Over all the years, I've never responded in any way to give him any encouragement, but he has been fabulous to me. And I just want to compliment him and congratulate him for doing such a wonderful job with Valley Temple. It means a great deal to us. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad I came to this. Thank you. All right, you all. If you want to say something to Saul, you can unmute, but try and go one at a time, and let's not make him stay here all night. Thank you all for coming. And if Ben Joseph is still there, he recently got married in October, I'm told. So mazel tov to Ben and his wife, and there they are.
Thank you very
Mazel
much.
tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. My grandma and
Your
grandpa.
grandpa doesn't ever tell us anything, nor does your aunt. So I found out today that you got married. So
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you
very much.
Thanks, Solly.
Hi.
Happy birthday, Aunt Julie.
Thank you.
Bye.
God, she sounds
Love you
almost
guys.
like
Thanks so much, Saul. Terrific to see you. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Hope to see both of you.
Saul Greenberg, you
Thanks.
you might want to know that my dad is still alive. He's about ready to be 96 years old. So
Fabulous.
Congratulations. That's fabulous.
has some eyesight
I
trouble.
talked to him like a month ago, I think. It sounds like he's doing great. And he had COVID and came out of it too, which is great.
I will tell him I said hi.
I will do that.
Oh, look, there's Debbie standing behind Saul and Sue. Thank you, Debbie, for all your help today.
She's the one who turns the machines on. They call these machines?
Yeah, they sometimes do, yes.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you, Sue. It's good to see you guys.
Oh, it's great to see all of you. I love you.
Kathy and Ivan, nice to see you guys. I haven't seen all of you. Randy, hi, how are you? And David, Felstein, all of you guys. I can't believe it. What have I been seeing here?
Sue and Saul, you both look fantastic, and it was so great to see you, and thank you.
Thank you. Who's talking?
Oh, Laura.
Who was it?
It was wonderful. Just really, I loved it.
Laura Loma? Was it? Is that
Yeah, wait, hold on, I'll show you Laura. Hold
Here,
on.
I'll wave.
There she is.
There she is.
Hi, Laura.
Great. Good, nice. Really good. Thank you. Thank you for calling.
When we open up in person, come and give us a hug.
Yeah. Right.
They like to come and not tell anybody that they're here. Nuts.
We like to come and not tell anybody that we're here.
Yeah, because you like to. You're afraid I'm going to ask you to do something, so you never tell me when you're coming.
I don't do anything. Do you know what the word retirement means?
I don't. That's the point. Till Austin came, I really needed the help, Saul. But thanks anyway.
What?
I said until Austin came, I really needed the help. But thanks anyway.
Right. Calling the wrong number. He doesn't
Here's
email.
Andrea. All right. So look at how you all are reluctant to go. Okay.
Yes, Rabbi Saul, I just wanted to say, I mean, you probably don't remember me. You married me and my husband in 2003. So thank you. It was a wonderful wedding, and we have 2 children, 15 and 12, and so thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for saying hello. Thank you.
Saul,
It's Diane and Ken.
I wanted to say that, we were members in 1974. And
Right.
at that time, one of the things that you had instituted was cooking and dancing in the Sunday school, the religious school. And I think that and your way with the kids also helped the congregation to grow, because the word got out that children really enjoy the religious school. Also, I wanted to tell you that you married two of our daughters in an interfaith marriage. There are 5 grandchildren. They've all had bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, been confirmed, been a part of Goldman Union Camp and all of that. So
That's what I meant by saving people to Judaism that otherwise would not have made it.
Right.
Oh, Gene, thank you so much. And it's wonderful
good to
seeing
see you
you and
both.
John. I hope you feel well.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Love to the kids. Great.
It's wonderful
right.
to see Debbie too.
I know.
The Newmans were going to say something, I think. So go ahead, Diane.
Renee. Right.
Diane, what were you going to say?
Diane and Ken, hello.
Hey. I just wanted to say thanks, Saul. It's great seeing you and Sue again and Debbie. And you married Ken and I. It'll be 35 years ago in July.
Wow.
Stay well, Saul. I remember. Ken didn't want to.
We're still waiting for the ketubah that we never got, Saul.
The what?
We never got a ketubah from you, so.
It's in my office. I'll have to look.
But thank you. This was great.
You're welcome.
I love
You're
it.
welcome. I probably forgot.
Did you?
Did you hear that part about retirement?
It's really nice seeing you.
I thought he said something about retirement.
Thank
Right.
you.
There are a lot of people in Florida for this event today. And I must tell you, I'm jealous and a little bit annoyed.
I wouldn't be too jealous. It's cold. I just want to say hi.
It was
Yeah.
20 here today.
Something tonight.
I had to shovel this morning.
Oh,
And I had to shovel yesterday too. Not that I'm bitter, but I am.
I just want to say hi.
Oh, look, it's Peggy Markstein.
I just want to say
Wow.
hi as well.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Your
It is a
parents
little
were
cold
founders
here.
of the temple, huh?
Yes, they were. And I remember being at the old J when we had classes there. I taught Sunday school there. Lots of years. So I remember sermons that you gave. I don't remember everyone's, but I remember yours. It was always important to Mom and Dad, the temple, and I'm so glad for all you did and all Sandford does too.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Are you in New York?
No, we're in Florida.
Oh, you're in Florida.
Sometimes we're in New York, but now we're in Florida for that.
When you left Cincinnati, did you go to New York first?
Well, we went because we were having our first grandbaby. So yes.
Mazel tov.
But we're in Florida, but we're in I have the condo that Mom and Dad had. So
Oh, nice.
We've been here
Along with Tony
a while.
Atkins and others, Peggy's parents, Ray Marie, and what was your dad's name?
And John.
John and Ray Marie were among the very first group that
right.
settled
Yeah.
the school that became the Valley Temple.
Right.
Yes. They were original members, right?
They were original members. Yes.
They're on the plaque.
They're on I think they're on the charter.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, nice to see you.
We
And
went to that condo. We've been to their condo.
Yes, and it looks totally different, but yes. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
And Lucky, I understand your daughter lives in Gainesville.
Whose daughter? Oh, Anne. Dr. Lucky.
Andrew now.
Yep, and she was so thrilled to see you a year or so ago when you came to visit.
Yeah, we were at the holidays, yeah.
Yep, and yeah, that was very, we figured out that your son-in-law was probably her Sunday school teacher at one point.
Oh, right.
About 10.
Well, he's now my rabbi, so that's it. He's here in Gainesville, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, forward to seeing your daughter again, and I hope we'll see you.
Yeah, they're this year spending the year in Czech Republic on sabbatical.
Oh, how nice. What are they doing?
What's their COVID situation there?
Bad.
Yeah.
They're pretty much locked down, but before it got bad, they did spend a lot of time visiting old synagogues and finding a lot of interesting Jewish history in Czech Republic. And they're a blended family also. They have Hanukkah and Christmas. And I would say my son-in-law, who's not Jewish, is the one who's more insistent that his children know a lot and feel as Jewish as they want.
Excellent.
So,
Yeah.
but it's a strange fate.
Yes, yes.
All right. So listen, I promised Saul and Sue, but more importantly, Debbie, that we would be done at 8:45, and it's 8:47 now.
Oh, wow.
A long trip
Perfect.
home.
Thank you.
It's like 5 minutes from Debbie's house. So drive carefully, stay healthy, and mazel tov on getting your shots. And
Ours is second.
and don't gloat once you get your second one. All right. Everybody, thanks for coming. Have a great night. Stay safe. Wear a mask
Bye.
until you're told otherwise.